Hi. Okay, so this is just a quick video lesson for Django and June attendees who are currently working through the Chord Shapes handouts associated with the 24 Gypsy Jazz Standards booklet. So each tune in that booklet will now have a handout that we've prepared with some suggested chord shapes for guitarists learning how to play the accompaniment on these different tunes. So this video lesson, I just want to make a couple quick points about how to use these handouts, and then I'll go through some of the common shapes you'll see popping up, especially the ones that I think might be more challenging for beginner students. So here we go. So point number one is, if you already have a chord shape you like that you're playing on any of these tunes, then feel free to go with that. Never feel beholden to the suggestions here. Second, you can always use just simple major bar chords or minor bar chords depending on the chord quality, or if it's a dominant 7th chord, you can just use flat 7 bar chords, or maybe a simple shape like this D7 shape, which I imagine a lot of students already know, or this kind of D7. All those simple bar chords and simple chords are completely welcome in this style, and great players have been using them as long as people have been playing this kind of music. So when in doubt, you can just use those simple chords. The last point I'd like to make is there are generally about 2 suggestions for every chord in any given handout. And if you don't like either of the 2 suggestions for one of the tunes, say you don't like the options you've been given for Lady Be Good, well, you could go to a tune like I Can't Give You Anything But Love, which is even in the same key, and you'll see there will be a different 2 options there. So feel free to grab chord shapes from any one of the handouts and use them on the other tunes. Never feel like you have to do just what's written there. But these should help you get started. Alright, so let's get to working on how to play some of these shapes. I'll try and go through this pretty quickly, and then if there's anything I think is a little more challenging or harder techniques, we'll talk more about those at the end of the video. So here we go. Let's start with this G major 6 chord. So we've got, that's the shape, that's the middle finger on the 3rd fret of the low E string. The middle finger is muting the A string. The first finger is on the 2nd fret of the D string. The ring finger is on, or the pinky is on the 4th fret of the G string. And the ring finger is on the 3rd fret of the B string. And then I believe the first finger, or maybe even this part of the hand, is muting the high E string. And that's what you want. When you're playing a chord where some of the notes aren't being fretted, some of the strings aren't being fretted, you want to try and find a way with your left hand to mute those strings, because generally we want to be able to strum with our right hand through all 6 strings, no matter what chord we're playing in our left hand. So that is this G major 6. Okay, so the last G major 6 I think is probably going to be one of the easier chords for you to play. For beginners, this is probably one of the chords that's the most intimidating. And this features the thumb on the 3rd fret of the low E string. That's very common in the style to fret notes with our thumb. And then it also has the middle finger catching 2 strings, in this case the A and D strings. And you do that by just putting the middle finger curled forward in between the A and D strings, and it should be able to catch both those strings. So that's the middle finger on the 5th fret on A and D, the first finger on the 4th fret of the G string, and then the ring finger catching the 5th fret of the B and E strings, and once again the thumb is fretting that 3rd fret on the low E string, that G note. So that's a good classic chord in this style. A slightly simpler version, which you'll see a lot in the Chord Shapes handouts, is one where instead of flattening the ring finger, it's just fretting the B string and the high E string is muted, and that's just a G major 6 shape. Also, people will sometimes play this without using that little bar for the middle finger, and they'll use their middle finger and their ring finger on these 2 notes for that G major 6, and you could use your pinky for the 5th fret on the B string. So that's cool. Okay, I'll talk more about that technique at the end of the video if we have time. Alright, so like I said, a good old bar chord is always welcome. And one interesting point is that sometimes we'll play almost the same voicing with the same notes, but use our thumb instead of a bar. So this is something you'd see, it's very common in the style. And so the high E string is muted, and the bass note is fretted with the thumb, that G. And then everything else is the same as that normal G major bar chord, except for the first finger is just playing that one note on the B string on the 3rd fret. So that's 3rd fret, 5th fret, 5th fret, 4th fret, 3rd fret, muted. Alright, so we'll just keep on breezing through G major. Alright, so here is a nice way to play D minor. So once again, that good old bar chord is always welcome. Here's another nice option. This uses the thumb again on the 1st fret of the low E string, and then you take the pinky or the ring finger, either one, and play the 3rd fret on the B string. I prefer to use the pinky. In that case, you'd use the middle finger on the 2nd fret of the G string, and the ring finger is on the 3rd fret of the D string, and that 3rd finger is also muting the A string. And then you have, so the thumb is playing that bass note on the 1st fret, and the high E string is muted too, I think in that case by sort of this part of the hand. Alright, so that is that D minor with the thumb. If it's really, really hard to fret that note with the thumb, you can also just use the thumb to mute the low E string. Alright, we're losing our pages. So let's talk about this minor 6 shape. This is another very playable, very common minor 6 shape, and we can play it a bunch of different ways. As it's written here, you take your ring finger and just bar that across the 3rd fret of the high E, B, and G strings, and then your first finger would play the 2nd fret on the D string, and then your middle finger would play the 3rd fret on the low E string and also mute the A string. We can also play this with the ring finger lifted just slightly so that the high E string is muted. We could also play this, if barring with that ring finger is uncomfortable for you, you could use your pinky on the 3rd fret of the B string and your ring finger on the 3rd fret of the G string and play this shape this way. So once again, those last 2 versions of this chord are missing this note, so they really become this shape. But then sometimes we can make an even smaller shape where it's just those 3 notes and you're muting the B string and the E string. So that would sound like And so I would probably, the challenge becomes just getting a nice clean mute of the B and E strings, because we would still probably play through all 6 strings with the right hand. So that's going to happen mostly with the first finger, in that case, that muting. Alright, so that is a very common movable shape. You'll find yourself using that a lot. So here is a G minor 6 shape. And like a lot of these chords, there's multiple ways to play this. This is the one that really works for me personally. And I picked this up from some great top level players, so you can trust that it's not just my own weird way of playing it. So here we go. Our pinky is on the 5th fret of the B string. The first finger is on the 3rd fret of the G string, and then the ring finger goes right in between the A and D strings again on the 5th fret. So it's just in that space right in between. It's not flattened, it's just using the tip of the finger, and then the thumb plays the bass note. Now, for some people, using the ring finger to catch both the A and D strings is uncomfortable, and in that case, you could try using your middle finger on the 5th fret of the A string and your ring finger on the 5th fret of the D string, and then once again using your thumb for that bass note. You can also use your thumb just to mute the low E string. So those are probably the best 2 or 3 ways to play that chord shape, if you see it come up on the chord shape handout, or if you just like to use it when playing a G minor chord. Alright, so we're just going to touch on a couple more chords. So, C major 6-9. Take our ring finger and put it on the 3rd fret of the high E and B strings. Take our first finger and put it on the 2nd fret of the D and G strings. And take the middle finger and place that on the 3rd fret of the low E and A strings. So once again, these fingers are sort of flattening out to play those groups of 2 and 2, but the middle finger, so that it's not muting all those other strings, really has to curl forward, and you're just putting that middle finger right in between the low E and A strings. So that gets a nice full sound. If you ever need a C major shape and this is giving you fits, you can always, once again, just use a good old C major bar chord in any of the places you know to play it. But this is a nice shape, and once again, if we want, we could mute the high E string so that you've just got the 5 lowest sounding strings ringing. So that would be without the ring finger flattened. And so that sounds like that. And that's always welcome. You could play just the inside 4 strings if, say, that technique with the middle finger catching 2 strings is really challenging for you. It's okay to just play that C note there on the 3rd fret of the A string and just mute the low E string. And then you could just use just even the middle 4 strings and mute the high E and the low E. Listen for which sounds you like, and it's always going to be a bit of a compromise between what you can comfortably play and what sounds you like to play. But it's all okay to do. There's the Django police won't come after you if you mute some strings. So one of the last shapes I'd like to talk about is the C7-9. So once again, you could always just play good old C7 like that, or C7 like this, and these are movable shapes. So I'm picking some keys for these chord shapes, but we could be talking about, say, D7-9, 2 frets up from this chord. But for clarity, to match this shape here, let's talk about C7-9. So this is a lot like that other shape. So ring finger is on the 3rd fret of the high E, the B, and the G strings. So that's barred across. First finger is on the 2nd fret of the D string, and the middle finger is once again in between the low E and A strings on the 3rd fret. And just like the C6-9, we could bring the ring finger up a little bit more to mute the high E string. We could use our pinky and just fret each note and keep the high string muted. We could take our middle finger and just mute the low E string so that you're playing just the inside 4 strings. Those are all different ways you could play a chord like this if it came along. And then let's just tackle one last shape. So this, if you can see it, is a really nice way to play a D minor 7. So that D minor 7 looks like this. So once again, middle finger is in between the low E and A strings. The first finger is on the 3rd fret of the D string. The ring finger is on the 5th fret of the G string. The pinky is on the 6th fret of the B, and the high E string is muted. And so that is that chord, and you could use the middle finger and just do the inside strings, inside 4 strings, and that is all the chords. Okay, so I just want to spend the last couple minutes of this video talking a little bit more in depth about how to use the thumb for chords, and using either the middle finger or the ring finger to catch 2 strings by curling forward the way we do on these 2 strings in a chord shape like this G major 6-9. So as far as the thumb, you're generally making light contact with the side of your thumb on the string, and it should be very light, very gentle. You don't want to squeeze too hard. You don't want to strain your hand. And these chords were a big challenge for me when I started playing. For some people they come really easy, but for some of us they can feel like a big challenge, or they can feel impossible. But it just takes time, like any other technique. So be patient with yourself. I'd say if the chord's buzzing at all, then don't worry about it. I'd say instead of trying to squeeze really hard to force the chord to sound right, just let it buzz until you're a little more comfortable with putting your hand in that position. And I think in the practice room at least, I'd rather, as a teacher, that you be making a chord that has a little bit of rattle to it, as opposed to stressing out all the tendons in your hands, trying to grip the chord super hard to get it to sound. And then the neck tends to be a little leaner here than it is up here. So maybe just start by playing the chord, those thumb chords down at the 1st fret, and slowly, over time, you can move them up to higher frets. And so I think that addresses the thumb chord a little bit. So mostly with both these techniques, just be patient with yourself. Okay, and so with the middle finger or the ring finger, we'll stick to this chord shape as an example. So when you have two strings like this that you're playing with one finger, you just put it right in between the two strings. And it's something you'll just have to feel out. Sometimes for some people it comes easy, but I've had a lot of students who struggle with this at first, and they feel like their fingers getting under the strings and pushing them away from each other. You'll just have to sort of feel your way through to that point where you're making good contact with both strings. I can show you on my finger, that's where the strings have their little indentations, so you can see the A string at the top of the finger and the D string at the bottom of the tip of the middle finger there. And the big thing, I think, is that this joint is curling forward as opposed to flattening out, because if it flattens out the way we do in a lot of different bars, it's going to mute the other strings, and you don't want that. You want those other strings like the G string to sound. So that knuckle has to just get comfortable curling forward. So once again, just be patient with yourself. I've seen both these things go from impossible to very playable for students. And if you can be patient and struggle with it for a couple weeks, maybe a couple months, then you've got a whole new set of tools for the rest of your guitar playing life. And I think that in the long run is much easier than trying to avoid those shapes. So thanks for sticking with me, and if you have any more questions, I'll include my email address at the beginning and end of this video, and I'd be thrilled to hear from you. Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.